Carrie.
Hello.
Hello.
We're here at the Loyola Notre Dame Library in Maryland, and Anna is the assistant.
I'm the head of archives and special collections here at the library.
And Carrie is Dr. Carrie Boya, who is the assistant professor.
Of art history at Loyola University, Maryland.
And they are here to tell us about this exhibit of the Fore paintings that were given. The collection was given by Henry J. and Marion Knott, my grandparents.
After the library opened, the Knott family, Henry and Marion, bequeathed us with a rare book collection to, help the students of the university and the citizens of Baltimore. And Henry Knott was really a prolific book collector, rare book collector. To this day, I would estimate that probably between 50 to 60% of the books in our collection came from the Knott family. And one of the most interesting of those collections is the Forage painting collection. We have over 400 volumes of Forage painting books, and at the time of the gift, it was probably the second largest collection of its kind in the country. There was an exhibition in the 1970s of the books, but due to the nature of how hard they are to exhibit and display, they really have not been physically exhibited since. So this is really a special and a unique opportunity to see materials that are very rarely exhibited.
And as Anna had mentioned, one of the challenges of showing these books is how do you display them? And one of the wonders of forage painting, and I can show you with an example over here actually that a student made for the class. One of the things that we wanted to address with the exhibition that the students were concerned with is what is a forage painting? That's something you want people to learn from the exhibit. And so we actually tried our hand at forage painting, and one student left her book here for people to try out. And a forage painting, when you look at the book when it's closed, you can't see it, but when you open it and fan the pages, something appears. And so in this case...
And that looks sort of like the Loyola College Evergreen House.
It is.
Yeah.
It is?
Yes, that's the
cool.
humanities building.
Cool.
That is the humanities
Cool.
building. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
So ta-da, and it disappears again.
Wait a minute, one of your students did that?
Yes.
Awesome.
Basically what you have to do is, just to go through the process, you have to clamp the book so that the pages are fanned.
Right.
And then you paint a watercolor on the edge of the pages. And the way it works, if you think about the pages in side view, when they're fanned, they look almost like steps. And so the painting is not actually on the edge of the page, it's kind of like on the top of the steps when the pages are fanned, if that makes any sense. That's why when you close it, it disappears, but when you fan it, you can see the painting.
Did they do the flip side?
Yeah, we didn't try doubles. We didn't try a double forage painting. And once the painting is dry, you can close it and then you gild it, so any trace of color that is left on the front edges of the pages is concealed.
Cool.
So it's a kind of mystery. But one of the problems with displaying them is how do you show the book? How do you show the painting? Because you have to hold it under pressure, and my students weren't going to stand here for 2 months holding the books, for example. So with the exhibition, we thought about the first problem was which books are we going to talk about, because there's over 300 in the collection. And we narrowed down a list to about 40 or 50. They looked at the books, they chose the ones that they were going to work on, and then as a group we thought about how can we put them together in ways that are instructive for the public and tell visitors to the exhibition about certain aspects of forage painting. And so this is a history of forage painting in 4 books. And what's wonderful about the Knott collection is it has a wide variety of forage paintings from different time periods. And this one over here is a very, very early forage painting. So the first hidden forage paintings date to England from, the first dated one is 1653. And this painting is probably 1660, 1670, 1680. And it has the monogram of King Charles II on it.
Oh, cool.
So that's a very, very early forage painting. And there's the genesis of this art form. And then if you skip to the other side of the case,
Well, I don't remember this, but when printing began, was that about 200, Gutenberg, was that about
1450s.
200 years prior to the painting of the Fore?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. And there had been a very, very long, almost an eon-long history, over an eon-long history of book painting and decoration up to that point. But it seems that this trick of painting on the edge of a book so that it's only visible when it's fanned is something that was developed under Charles II in England, so 1650s, 1660s, that period of time. So that's a very early example.
Look at this beautiful one.
Oh yes, that's the last one. So
Okay, sorry.
chronologically,
So they start off very basic and almost abstract
Right.
in the beginning, and then
and then in the late 18th century in England, a company of binders named the Edwards Binders from Halifax, but they also had a bookshop in England, were instrumental in popularizing the art of forage painting. And what they did is they adopted landscape painting as a subject for forage painting. And this was a brilliant idea on their part because this was the era of the picturesque. It was an era in which going out, touring the landscape, making watercolor paintings of the landscape was all the rage. And so if you put those on a book, it makes the book even more interesting and saleable. And we have an example in the collection of an Edwards Forage painted book, which was absolutely amazing. I saw it on the shelf and I recognized it from the binding because they have characteristic white bindings, and I said, I think that's an Edwards book. And I pulled it off the shelf and it was, and so it's wonderful to have this in the collection because really it was the Edwards who popularized the art form, and it's because of their influence that forage painting really is a medium that's still practiced today. You know, after the late 18th century is probably the most common subject for forage painting, and it's really the only subject for forage painting that you see in the late 18th and very early 19th century. And that widespread interest is what really kind of fed the popularity of forage painting. And then the third example that we chose for this case, just History of Forage Painting in 4 books, was this work by a printer and binder based in Edinburgh and London. And it's an example of how landscape painting spread into cityscape painting, and by 1815, 1820, there were a number of firms in England that provided books with luxury bindings and forage painting, so it wasn't just the Edwards anymore. So it's a good example of the spread of this art form. And then the book that you were remarking is a later example. It's from 1953 or 1954, and it's a indication of how the art from 300 years prior is still being practiced by some artists even today. And we figured out that this painting was done by Vera Dutter, who was an artist working in Los Angeles. And one of our students did some research on this book and found another copy of this book. It's celebrating the coronation of Elizabeth II. And a copy of this book in the Strand bookstore in New York that had a very, very similar forage painting, the subject of which is the soon-to-be queen riding from Buckingham Palace in a carriage to Westminster. So there, in 4 books, you have the history of forage painting from its origins through the Edwards, through its continuation today.